The Attorney General of the United States was back on Capitol Hill this week. He went to a Senate hearing. He had been tentatively scheduled to go to a House hearing, and he skipped out on that or didn't do that because he thought the terms of the hearing were unacceptable, namely that the Chairman Gerald Nadler, Democrat from New York, was basically going to just turn into a sort of a partisan dog and pony show and not engage in an attempt at genuine oversight, which is the reason why these executive agency officials have to go to the Hill, is to comply with Congress's oversight role. And oversight doesn't include political oversight or damaging your future political opponent. So if there's some legitimate reason, for instance, just to pick a different topic, to get Trump's tax returns for some oversight reason, then perhaps they could be relinquished. But just to get them because you want to see them, because they're going to be politically damaging to the president, well, that's not an appropriate reason, and that's why those records have been withheld, and that's why Barr said he was staying away from the House side. Now, he did go to the Senate side, and, well, it's a take your pick of which Democrat senator who's running for president is more disappointing than the next. I'm not sure. Kamala Harris, and I won't, just to set the table here, we're not going to play selections of every one of them. We're only going to play clips about the perjury or lack thereof that William Barr presented in his testimony. I thought that the committee members generally did a poor job, as they usually do, Democrats and Republicans alike, and I thought the Democrats were especially, what's the right word? Ridiculous when they would say things like Kamala Harris was asking if he had personally seen some of the evidence that Mueller referenced in his report, I guess depositions or something like that. Like, I want to ask her, in the years when she was Attorney General of California, has she ever once examined a piece of physical evidence or testimonial evidence in her capacity? I mean, there's been many thousands of people behind bars based on her actions as California Attorney General. Did she ever look at one of those evidence pieces? I'm going to go ahead and bet everything that she didn't, because that's not the job of a senior supervisory attorney in a government office like that. They don't do it. And to act like it's something that maybe he should have done is ridiculous. And there are many notions, or many rather instances of questions like that from the assembled. So, all right, well, let's get to the more meaty topic here, and that's whether or not Bill Barr committed perjury. This is what Nancy Pelosi said in that regard.
What is deadly serious about it is the Attorney General of the United States of America was not telling the truth to the Congress of the United States. That's a crime. He lied to Congress. If anybody else did that, it would be considered a crime. Nobody is above the law, not the President of the United States and not the Attorney General.
What did he do? How did he lie? Did Donald Trump really collude with Vladimir Putin for discount condos in Moscow and the sweet Osetra caviar by the bucket? No, not at all. They allege that what Mr. Barr did was, for the period of time when the Mueller report was completed and submitted to the Department of Justice, and the time when it was released to the public, the Democrats are upset that Donald Trump was basically able to sort of direct the media attention during that time in a way that was very sympathetic to him. So no collusion, no obstruction, complete exoneration, those sorts of phrases. And it's precisely because Bob Barr didn't include Robert Mueller's list of, 10 items, he said, where Trump could have obstructed justice, but did not conclude that Trump obstructed justice, but just placed there as some sort of impeachment, follow the crumb line. That's what this is about. Nothing else. After he had the report, General Barr went to Congress on April the 10th and testified before the Senate. And he had two exchanges, which are what everybody's talking about with this perjury, obstruction of justice, or whatever, as it relates to General Barr. One is an exchange with Charlie Crist, and the other is an exchange with Chris Van Hollen. Let's take Mr. Van Hollen first.
Did Bob Mueller support your conclusion?
I don't know whether Bob Mueller supported my conclusion.
Okay, so this is whether or not Robert Mueller supported the conclusion of General Barr. General Barr found that upon viewing the Mueller report that there was no prosecutable crime, that there was not that they could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump obstructed justice, which is the test, before bringing criminal charges. And as the Attorney General has said now in multiple instances before the Congress, this is a binary choice. It's not, well, yeah, but he's a son of a bitch or whatever. No, it's, did the man commit a crime for that we have proof beyond a reasonable doubt or can establish proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed this crime? And the answer that General Barr found himself with was no. Now, Mueller himself says in the report that he's not making a decision about obstruction of justice because of a Department of Justice guideline, a Clinton-era Department of Justice guideline, by the way, that prevents him from doing so under basically the prosecutor's manual that the Department of Justice gives. But William Barr, General Barr, doesn't say that that's the reason why he wouldn't bring an obstruction case against the president. He says there's not sufficient evidence to bring that case. So the idea that that Mueller would weigh in on his reasoning that way, it kind of doesn't make sense. But in any case, that's the point. And here it is with Crist.
Reports have emerged recently, General, that members of the special counsel's team are frustrated at some level with the limited information included in your March 24th letter, that it does not adequately or accurately necessarily portray the report's findings. Do you know what they're referencing with that?
No, I don't. I suspect that they probably wanted, more put out. But in my view, I was not interested in putting out summaries or trying to summarize, because I think any summary, regardless of who prepares it, not only runs the risk of, being under-inclusive or over-inclusive, but also, would trigger a lot of discussion and analysis that really should await everything coming out at once. So I was not interested in a summary of the report.
How about that great passive language at the start of his question? By the way, reports have emerged, like it's a bullet that was lodged in a body that just worked its way out slowly but surely and emerged. No. People on Robert Mueller's team leaked that to the Washington Post. They leaked their own letter that they wrote to bitch about Bob Barr. And the reason why is because Trump was winning the day politically. That's the reason why. Robert Barr says, hey, I just wanted to get out the conclusions of the report. I haven't actually summarized the report at all. He's working hard to get that report out in front of you. You can read it for yourself if you want to see it. What he did was summarize the principal conclusions of the report. Gee, I don't know if you remember, Mr. Crist, but before we started making campaign commercials for 2020, some of us were worried about whether or not the president was a Russian spy, because that's what you had America convinced of. And that's what Bob Barr wanted to get out there right away. Hey, guess what? Good news, everybody. President, not a Russian spy. What may be a better topic for investigation is why so many of these Democrat operatives who are on the Mueller team are obstructing justice with their leaks. What's up with that? No, we won't talk about that. And as a matter of fact, just so you don't think this is some libertarian or right-wing conspiracy theory, here's one of the leftists in chief, Larry O'Donnell, on MSNBC talking about the reason why they sent that letter in the first place. And this is the letter that, well, it was signed by Robert Mueller. William Barr alleges that, or surmises that it was written by members of his staff and called it snitty. And that seems right, especially when you consider the fact that it was leaked the night before Barr's testimony to the Senate. Crist von Hollen called into Lawrence O'Donnell's show on MSNBC, and they talked about the reason why this letter was sent in the first place.
When someone like Robert Mueller writes a letter like that to the Attorney General, it is for the Attorney General, but the author of that letter knows that the letter is going to live in history, knows that eventually that letter is going to be revealed to Congress, and knows that that letter on some news night like this is eventually going to be the big story of the night.
Yes, I believe strongly that Mueller was very disturbed and upset with the way the Attorney General had characterized his report when the Attorney General put together that four-page letter, and that Mueller wanted Mueller's views clearly documented so that there would be no discussion. He wanted them contemporaneously documented for the reasons you're saying. This is an important historical record, and he wanted to go on record on this important question.
Senator Crist von Hollen, thank you for joining us on this very important night. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you, Senator, very much. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.
I think it's absolutely disgusting that Mueller includes the 10 incidents or whatever he calls them that are not obstruction of justice, that try to give this roadmap to Congress, and then They don't get enough traction with that. It's not, they're losing the political battle. These Hillary Clinton Foundation people, these Democrats who are on Bob Mueller's team, realize that Trump is winning. They couldn't find the evidence against him, the real evidence against him, that he was a colluder. And so what they did was they tried to make the strongest case possible for obstruction of justice. And by the way, if you think there's any weakness at all in any of these cases, and I find them profoundly weak in all of their instances, it's the evidence viewed most likely to implicate Trump. Part of what we have, sort of a keystone of our justice system, is what's called the adversarial process, right? It's why you have the confrontation clause, the right to cross-examine witnesses and evidence against you. And it's because so much of that, if it's presented by one side, without that sort of robust cross-examination or challenging, will simply fall like a house of cards. So all this Bob Mueller stuff is all one way. It's never going to get worse than it is right now because there's been no pushback at all on any of the details. It's all prosecutorial. You know, think for a second, forget about the political implications, geopolitical, President of the United States. Just think of yourself, okay? And think of if a U.S. attorney, a federal prosecutor, wanted to get you. In fact, it was his appointed job to get you. And he interviewed every person that didn't like you and every neighbor that you had a spat with over the whatever, okay, and took all that testimony and presented it all, and not the positive, none of the positive, no interview about anything that might mitigate or ameliorate those circumstances, and presented the worst. That's what we have there. So if you look at that document, that's the worst possible way to view that information. Well, gee, that's pretty darn light. And these government servants, well, they just couldn't abide it. So they leaked it, and they try to spin it. And anything to kill the Trump, because they cannot abide that he's the president of the United States. I don't know if it's the Trump derangement syndrome or the political fundraising or what the real motivation is. Maybe it's to destroy Barr's credibility in advance of the future investigations into how we got to this with the Steele-Hansmeier memorandum and Jim Comey's blackmail his attempt to blackmail Donald Trump in the Oval Office. I don't know. But I know that Bob Barr didn't perjure himself when he said that he didn't know what the hell they were talking about when they wrote a nasty letter to the Washington Post. Barr says he picks up the phone and calls Mueller and asks him, did I misrepresent? Did I say something that wasn't true? And Mueller says no. It's the portrayal of the report that they're cross with. They can't handle the fact, again, this is the third time I'm saying it, Trump's winning politically because of no collusion with Russia. They cannot abide it. Bob Mueller says time and again he's not interested in summarizing the report. He just wanted to get out the conclusion, and then he set to work to release the whole report. And I can tell you that Volume 2, which I've read almost in its entirety, is largely free from redactions. But Bob Mueller, guess what he did when he submitted the report? Did he have it coded for redactions required by federal law so that the report could be released forthwith if the administration so decided? No, absolutely not. They didn't. And Bob Barr has, I read a story today, I think it was Rolling Stone, they said Bob Barr sat on the report for weeks. Sat on it? Are you kidding me? How long does it take to examine a 450-page report and make sure nothing that is legally impermissible to be included and released in it is excluded? Do you think a couple weeks is good? I mean, all in, you got to say Bob Barr did an excellent job here. But you don't say that if, of course, your prime directive is to get or defeat Trump politically.